There are very specific genetic variants that will determine what your best exercise program is, what the best exercise program is that you can suggest to your clients. Not everybody is programmed to be able to do long distance or sprints or super strength training exercise. So how do you know? How do you know what the best thing is for you so you don't get injured, so that you do your best, so you don't strain your body? You can look at the genes. You can also ask very specific questions. So welcome back to the channel. I'm Dr. Rita Marie Loscalzo, and today we are going to talk about how those genetic factors play in to the choice of exercise that you, as a health practitioner, recommend to your clients, or that you, as a person who wants to get fit, pay attention to. So there's so many factors that we discuss on today's episode. It's actually a recording of a podcast, and you don't have to be watching. You can just listen in. So go off to the gym, go for a walk, make some good, healthy food, and listen in and learn.
Well, there's multiple factors to take in consideration, just like you mentioned earlier in your introduction. It is not only about muscles and going to the gym and getting hard, or going hard, like they say it, and eating tons of protein, even sleeping well. There is several factors, and it starts, from my perspective, it starts really by having a look into how our body is actually accumulating fat. Most people, they exercise to lose weight, and I would say that the right terminology is to lose fat, because the fat is the component here that is most critical in our health and predictor of longevity. And unfortunately, there are some genes that do impact our ability to gain weight or to lose weight. I think that's a good way to start the conversation. Don't you think?
I think that's a great way, because you're right. Most people, although fitness is so important, not just for weight loss and maintenance, it's so important for overall health, but that's what people think about. I'm just going to go on, I'm going to run, I'm going to walk, I'm going to lift weights, whatever it is. They get frustrated when they start to do things that they're told to do, and then their weight doesn't shift, or they lose muscle instead of fat. So I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah, there is a great, I guess, say great is just because information. I will say this too. A lot of individuals are afraid of knowing their genetic predispositions. They don't want to dive deeper because, they just don't want to confront this at this point. I would encourage the listener to view this as information. And once we have information, we can, at that point, take action, and actions that is actually going to be individualized, right? Because doing what someone else does is rarely the case that's going to work. It might work temporarily, but is not going to work in the long term, because we're all biochemically individual and different. So the more we understand who we are, and start with the genetics, which is responsible, anything between, 5 to 10%, in some cases of cancers, maybe a little bit more, but generally speaking is 5 to 10%. Everything else is lifestyle, but it does take, something to take in consideration. And this gene that I'm talking about is this called FTO. And, there is different reports in the market as far as, to understand the genes, and some reports provided, other reports don't, but there is plenty of information out there. And this gene has been in the news in the last couple of years, at least, and is technically a fat mass, an obesity gene. And basically, it also relates to the consumption of saturated fat, and then how it relates to obesity and how it relates to insulin resistance. For example, in my case, I actually have several of this FTO, because there is different, readings of this. All of mine that show up, I have high risk. And you wonder sometimes, right? When I was a teenager, I remember never liking to see my pictures, because I always felt like I was, had more weight. There is some kind of weight issue since I was a kid. For me, I feel like I can gain weight, but with the smell of food. And this FTO is everywhere in my case. So the FTO also is going to increase our probability, if you have a mutation of this gene, of, insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. I think it is important for people to understand if they have this mutation, just so they can take more precaution, to be more cautious in their food choices. Also, their exercise choices, which we're going to talk a little bit more about it. So that's what I would like to say about this FTO gene, that it is part of our lives and we can manage it, right? A gene just because we have this gene does not mean that we're now doomed to die with type 2 diabetes or anything like that, or be obese. No. Like I mentioned, 5 to 10%, most of the cases is the implication. Our choices here matter.
It's important to realize that because we want to blame our genes. Well, my mom was fat and my dad was fat, so I'm going to be fat. Nothing I can do about it. You have multiples of that gene. And if I look at, or that gene variation, you call it mutations. Some people call it mutations. I prefer to call them variations because I don't like to think of any of us as mutant. You're not a mutant, right? This is an audio only podcast, so people can't see you, but you're very fit. You're very lean. But that means that you're there because you work at it. You're there because you carefully choose your food. You're there because you choose a fitness regime that helps you to minimize fat gain and maximize muscle. And that's what people need to realize. Having that gene means that you are the one that people are not envying sitting at the table. They go, how do you eat so much and you guys stay so thin? But those people that we all kind of like look at and go, how did that work out? She just ate 3 times as much as I did. And she's staying lean and slim because the FTO gene. And I quite frankly don't even remember what my FTO status is, but I have a feeling I'm there with you as well, because I can stay nice and lean and trim and slim, but as soon as I start to eat, ouch.
Yeah, but it's kind of interesting because I love fat. I absolutely love to eat fat. And it's, I'm talking about mostly coming from, plant-based, from nuts and that sort, and seeds. I can divorce quite a bit of it. Honestly, that's when I gain most of my weight. And it goes line in line. I mean, I remember, years ago, this is over 10 years now, when I started my health and wellness journey. I went from basically a very poor diet to a paleo diet. And because I got fascinated about what the paleo diet is, as far as, anti-inflammatory and cutting all the junk out. For me, that was, challenging. But all of a sudden I start cooking food, and boy, didn't that food taste good. I learned how to cook when I started the paleo diet. And I initially gained weight because I started eating more of this amazing food, but also I started eating a lot of more saturated fat, which for some individuals is not a big deal. And for the longest time, I couldn't understand. I just started noticing that the more, nuts that I ate, the easier was for me to gain weight. And obviously, fat has 9 grams. Compared to 4 grams, calories, per gram. So 9 calories per gram compared to protein and carbs. So, one can say easily that's the reason, but it's not like I was eating insane amount, but it goes to say the power of this when you have variations, a number of variations like I have. So it's interesting to understand that and to know so you can make adjustments properly.
So, when you say that gives me as practitioners, and we're asking people questions, right? When we hear that, I tried the keto diet or I tried the paleo diet and that didn't work for me because I gained weight, that this might be this gene variant that's playing into it. Yeah, it could be a gallbladder issue and your body can't tolerate all that fat. But on the other hand, I hear that all the time. And I find that, I think for me as well, that I love my fats. I love my avocados and coconut and nuts and seeds. And I could sit there with a jar of nut butter and just eat it with a spoon and devour it. And that's when I put on weight. As practitioners, we need to do that careful questioning to find out, because some people are not going to do their genes. And when you understand the genes, though, from a practitioner standpoint, you understand those genes, you can kind of guess. And usually it's pretty accurate guess from a history, which of those gene variants that person may have. And then you're going to be able to coach them in a better way. So besides the FTO, are there other genes? Did you want to say anything more about FTO? But interested, are there other genetic SNPs that tell people whether they need to do more endurance training or more sprint type training or more muscle building or less muscle building?
I do want to say one more thing about a gene not associated directly with the fitness. There is a gene called PPAR alpha that is directly correlated to ketogenic diet and the ability of the body to actually get into the ketosis. So since you mentioned the ketogenic diet and it's so much on the news, right? And unfortunately, a lot of individuals go into a keto diet, but not really keeping track of their ketones. And they go really to kind of eat, accordingly to cut some of the junk and move on. But actually, there is this PPAR alpha and the gamma, which is, you want to think about the FTO as a kind of a front end, part of this process of fat. And then there is this PPAR alpha and gamma that is actually in the back end of the things. And that PPAR is found primarily in brown adipose tissue and in the liver and actually, in several other muscles. Basically is going to help kind of spread and is responsible to spread the fatty acids to metabolism. So if a person has an alteration of this PPAR alpha and is in a keto diet, is likely to have issues actually in a keto diet, is not going to get the results. It's something to keep in mind, because we always hear, some person goes into the keto and they found no results and they think there is something wrong with them or they think that they are doing something wrong. And in reality, it's just a genetic predisposition. So you know what? You move on, you go into a diet that is maybe not as taxing and not so fat oriented like ketogenic diet. And, then you might get better results. I just want to add that because I don't think that this gene is very well known. And in my case, for example, I have like a normal risk for blood lipids and a type 2 diabetes in response of a diet high in saturated fat. So again, this is like the FTO is related to a diet high in saturated fats. So here is not to say you're not going to be consuming fats, right? You're just going to have to be the monosaturated fats or polysaturated fats that will be helpful. So all that coconut, that I love so much, got to scale down a little bit, right?
Right? Yeah, I got to look at those genes. There's so many genes out there when you get your genes tested that there's no way you're going to remember all 700,000 genes that were tested, right? And so when you read something, and this is what I'd recommend as a practitioner, you're working with people, have charts available, have reference materials available so you can look them up. And if you have a particular bent in your practice, a particular type of person that you're working with or condition, then you study those or you have those more handy. But you're not going to remember them all. So don't worry about it. Just write things down, take notes, and you're going to get, if you download our reinventhealthcare.com/genes, we have a couple of those charts for you that you can refer to. So what else?
So now we got some of those things that might be impediments, right? So when we have to get our diet right, and understanding these genes will help us kind of tweak and make adjustments. But then we go back to, the fitness level of it. So yes, there is some genes, there is one gene specifically called the ACTN3 that is kind of going to tell us really if we're a sprinter, a power person, or if we're more like an endurance kind of individual. And that is going to make kind of sense. Some people sometimes they say, I don't like to do this, or they go into a sprint and they're freaking dying, right? And here we are. We got to go for a run. We got to get our cardiovascular, and do a 3-mile run or 5-mile run. Well, that might not be the thing for you. And so including, instead of doing sprints that are short and go all out, maybe you are better off to go, endurance, to go into a level 2 or a level, 1 or 2 and what I mean is your heart rate level. I like to wear a heart rate monitor and I control, my cardiovascular that way. And sometimes I go on runs that are level 2, that is 60% of my heart. And then I go on to 70%, sometimes 80, sometimes 90% of my max heart rate. And that is all to kind of give the body a chance to, I want to say, push in a way, but also to come back to what is best for me. And in my case, I'm a more of endurance type of athlete, I want to say. And that has been very clear for me, even before understanding this genetics of mine over here. So when I go to the gym, I beat most of these folks. I'm 47. When there is long workouts, Maria is on for the long. And they're like, how the hell can you do it? And put me to run sprints, I don't do so well. So I control. So in this case, we can use this kind of information to adapt. And if you're working with a personal trainer, if the personal trainer has the education to help you guide you through, great. If not, if you are empowered and you have this, and you are going to help that personal trainer to guide you as well. But the reality is you got to do what is best for you to achieve the results. So going against the grind over here and pushing through is not going to be the answer to get results when you have this type of genes that are saying that either you're a fast twitch, or slow twitch kind of muscle person, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. And it explains for me. And I found out that I'm more of an endurance, and I could have told you that, right? I just could have told you that. Try to get me sprinting and I can't do it. But I can just go on and on and on and on for hours, marathons, half marathons. I've never tried an ultra marathon, probably be okay with that, as long as I keep the pace low enough. As soon as I try to push the pace, then I get worn out. Some people, no matter what pace they do, they just can't make it past, 15 minutes if they're not really geared towards, genetically programmed towards endurance. And again, coming back to, we're talking to practitioners here. When you're working with somebody and you ask questions, you can ask the right questions, even if they don't have their genes. You can ask their right questions when you work out. Do you do better with short bursts of exercise? Do you do better with long? Have you done any track stuff in high school? And where did you do better? My son he's the opposite of me. And he was just saying, oh yeah, when I was in high school, I used to do the 300-yard sprints. Now me, I'd be doing the 6, 7, whatever the long distance stuff is, because that's what I'm good at. So we all have to do that and adapt it and help people to see there's nothing wrong with you. This is just it. The way you're genetically programmed, don't try to go against the grain of that.
This is important because low muscle strength is associated with all-cause mortality, period. So we do want to age and have muscles, right? For multiple reasons. So applying what is right for you, it is really, and for the clients that we work with, it is the best route. So oftentimes trainers specifically, they try to push individuals to one direction because that's the direction that athletes are actually getting results. Well, they do the same time of work and assessment with athletes. They're going to see, and this kind of gene that we're talking about here, they've seen that individuals who are more successful being a sprinter carry, X, and endurance carrying X and W. So it is important because of that. The reality is not doing anything to build your muscles is not the answer. Okay. Related to that, I think it's important for us to understand that, like myself, as more prone to be an endurance, I have like a kind of mix. So I can be either one. So for me, and I noticed this on my own workouts, it's a high load kind of type of activity or low repetition resistance training to build the muscles. And for my cardiovascular, that's when I do best with high intensity training. So those are short bursts, and you take a break in a short burst. I thrive on those movements and, in this kind of workouts. That's why personally, I do like CrossFit. It works perfectly for my health and for my well-being. And I can scale to adapt to, my cycle, to adapt to how I feel. Knowing my body and my predispositions really help to adapt.
Yeah, that's great. And it's so true that we do need to keep muscle mass up. And a lot of people, they shy away from exercise because they've had negative experiences with it, but they haven't necessarily worked with somebody who could help them to find the regime that's going to work best for them, for their age, for their health situation, but also for their genes. So that's good. Can you repeat the name of that gene again? It was the A?
The last one, yes, ACTN3.
ACTN3. Okay.
Yeah, it's about if you're basically predisposed to being a sprinter or a power athlete or endurance athlete. And by the way, don't be shy. Nobody should be shy about the word athlete. We are all athletes in this world. in some way or another, we're in one kind of a race, right?
Exactly. I love the word athlete. I love to refer to myself as athletic, even if I'm not world class and I'm not a racer that wins races. I just do them and finish. But I love referring that. There's an athlete in all of us. We've had people in our programs like who at age 72 started doing CrossFit and now is climbing ropes and doing pull-ups. And I'm like, whoa, but never knew she had that inner athlete before. So I think it's very, very cool. Are there other genes that we should be aware of that would help inform how we would advise our clients in terms of exercise?
A lot of individuals, especially women, and especially after a certain age, I want to say after their 40s, especially, if they have not exercised much, their athlete career wasn't the longest and they maybe did some things, but, for the last several years, they've been maybe just a walker and they hear about people getting injured. They are afraid of getting injured, right? They feel fragile in some ways because they look at themselves in the mirror and they say, I don't look toned, I don't have muscles. So in some ways, their self-esteem is already kind of weaker, right? And they are afraid of, injuries. Well, there are some genes that is going to inform us of our probability or likelihood, I guess, of joint issues, our muscle issues, and collagen also. And boy, let me tell you, I have all.
So you're prone to injury, girl.
And you know me, and I've had some over the years, some injuries. But the beautiful thing is, we don't stop. We kind of learn how to fuel the body with what the body needs. So there is kind of a genes in the segments of the INS, IGF2 genes. These are, and the CCL2 genes. These genes are basically going to tell us our rate of recovery and probability of getting injured. And yes, I don't have anything that is green and good to go. But you know what? It's okay with me. So in this case, when we have this awareness, what do we do? And I've been doing this for some time now, more religiously in the last maybe year and a half than previously. I support my body with extra collagen and extra amino acids. And that is, really what we need to, in this case, a person like myself who is in trouble from the get-go. The moment that we understand that we have this, we can support ourselves nutritionally. Also, in my case, there is going to be an understanding over here of rest, right? So some people like to push, and they go hard for an hour. They go hard next day for another hour, and they start getting very sore. They start not enjoying their workouts anymore. Well, if we have this awareness, we got to know when to push back, when to say, you know what, I need extra rest. I need to put a day in between. Or we go to the gym already with that understanding in mind, saying, instead of going and pushing ultra hard, I'm going to go halfway over here because I love my body, right? And I want to keep doing this for the rest of my life, just like the individual starting at 72. She didn't know she had it. Now she has exposure to it. And I hope that she's also taking the precautions. The more she understands about her body, the better she will be to maintain and be able to keep going to the gym. I work out 4 to 5 times a week, sometimes 6 times a week. So I control that, but I don't also go hard an hour every time. My workouts are 20, 30 minutes, right? Yeah, there is a warm up. There is sometimes just a part of weightlifting. That is timed and paced. But I immediately support after my strength training with amino acids. I go to the gym, or if I'm working out from home or my own gym here, I take my amino acids. And if I'm going in a fasting state in the morning, I kind of measure to see if I have the amount of carbs in my body, right? From the meal before, there is a tool, Lumen, that is going to tell you if I'm burning carbs, if I'm burning fats, and I can kind of use that to help me. But if not, I take amino acids. I put collagen in my smoothies. I normally don't drink collagen water, but that's what I do with smoothies, or sometimes I put on tea, and I do drink some caffeine. Sometimes I put on the coffee unflavored. I don't drink a lot of caffeine, but that's the way that I kind of use collagen to help my body repair, and support this innate, probabilities of getting injured.
And if you stayed home and laid on the couch, you probably would have very little chance of getting injured, even with those genes, right? But you choose to do the right thing for your body and get out there and exercise. So taking those precautions. It was interesting as I was learning about these genes, my younger son's a big skateboarder, and he was spraining his ankles all the time, spraining his ankles, spraining his elbows, spraining his knees. And it's a heavy duty sport and they get falling. But then when I looked at his genes, he has issues with the collagen and the injury. So it totally made sense. So I'm like, here's a nice protein powder with all the amino acids you need for collagen repair. He's in his early 20s, doesn't necessarily listen to mama. So I don't know if he does it or not, but it's things that you can know when you're coaching people and say, look, based on these genes, you're going to need some extra support. And you want to look at whether, it's collagen or whether it's bone broth or whether it's just the plant-based collagen peptides, the various amino acids, particularly proline, hydroxyproline, and lysine, that help support, and vitamin C that helps support the creation of the collagen. So people say, oh, everybody should be taking collagen, or not everybody needs to take it. So why bother, right? So I think it's a really good thing that we should know. Are there any other genes you want to tell us about? And then I want to ask you about blood sugar.
No, I think these are the kind of the most important ones that I would like to highlight as far as fitness, going through understanding the fat, that might have a predisposition over here, diets, like the PPAR, alpha and gamma, that you might have not be prone to be doing some of these high fat diets that will create disadvantage for you. So you can be working out quite a bit, right? But not effectively. And again, the type of gene that you have will dictate where you're going to shine best. Because the idea over here is for us to move, right? I call move your fanny, and in some way or another every single day. And if it is going to start with you getting out of the couch or your client getting out of the couch, let's start that way. And then the next step is to add some weights to their walks. And then after the next step, they're going to start feeling better by just moving. And then we start adding some weight to it, body weight, from the squats, from the lunges, from the push-ups. We start some ways. Oftentimes, individuals want to kind of skip the basics. They want to go, from doing very little to going very hard. And then they get very sore or even get injured. And then everything falls apart. And the story then becomes the same over and over. Every, 2 or 3 times a year, they try the same thing. Our job as coaches is to coach them to build something that is consistently done, listening to their body. And if we have the ability to get their genetics done and kind of help them produce or recommend, I want to say a therapy that is for them, then they're going to be more engaged. They're going to be on your side, when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you made about when, from a lot of the times after a while and having a lot of experience, you get to know based on their history, based on what they're telling them, they get injured a lot, or they don't like to do long distance, or, they get fat no matter what they do. You get to know what those genes, the likelihood of them having those genes is. But when you actually measure it, they actually stand up and pay attention. They go, oh, and then they listen to the same stuff you would have told them probably had you not seen their genes, but now they're going to listen because this piece of paper that measured their insides is actually there. So that's my biggest enamoration, as I will say, with genetic testing, is that it helps to motivate people dramatically. And we did an episode on that a couple of episodes ago. So let's just finish with a little bit about blood sugar, because I know blood sugar is so heavily controlled by the genes. And are there particular, patterns or things that, based on how people handle their blood sugar, that would inform what kind of not nutrition programs, obviously that's true, but fitness programs we might recommend?
So in a nutshell, if we, from a general perspective, exercise is going to always improve your insulin sensitivity, is going to help regulate your blood sugar. Okay. Now let's take in consideration a few, genetic predispositions, right? And I'm assuming over here you're eating perfectly to your body.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
How many people do you know like that?
I don't know. I don't know how many individuals, I sometimes I take a stand of just being a listener at the gym, and I just shake my head inside. And I'm like, oh boy, you wonder why these people are not getting results, right? So often, again, depending on the person, the average woman in their 30s or 40 is having some hormonal difficulty, right? And there is a lot of women who are in a state of fatigue and burnout. Stressors from the house, from being a wife, a mom, having a job, whatever that is. And then there is stressors that are environmental stressors. There is stressors that are from actually being created inside the body, right? That naturally happens with free radicals. And there is then the diet that might be not the best for you, and so on, so on. So all those kind of things, they are stressors. And often we kind of ignore. We just pinpoint. We try to answer the question with one thing. This is one reason that I cannot lose weight, or this is one reason I cannot build the muscle. That's not, I think, the mindset. The mindset is there's multiple factors. The body does not work in isolation. Nothing in the body works in isolation. And when it comes to exercise and blood sugar is the same. You remember probably that when I did that little exercise for 2 weeks measuring, I had a glucometer, right? And a glucose monitor for 2 weeks. And I was doing a lot of testing with exercise and food, and exercise and fasting, and exercise, eat before I exercise, eat after, and things like that. It is quite fascinating if we're just taking consideration the uniqueness of our body. And I would recommend over here, one of the amazing things that we can do for our clients is to get one of these monitors and help them to understand how their body is operating. Because in my case, in my level of fitness, again, oftentimes we go into the generic things. We read something and we think that's going to apply to us. I would say let's step back, because you and I are different. So by having a glucose monitor on you for 14 days, and you become a little obsessed in a nice way of measuring these things, you're going to be learning so much that you're going to take, your choices are going to be quite different. And so, yes, I mean, when you exercise, if you ate a couple hours prior and you had maybe a balanced meal with a little bit of carbs, and some protein, maybe fat, you might have lots of energy for strength training, right? Then you're going to be able to lift heavier. Now, if you are going a fasted state, maybe not. But do you have all it takes? Is your body equipped to lift the same way? Is your body maybe trained to use fat to operate? Maybe not, or maybe yes. But there is all these ways that we can understand and learn from the body. Multiple times I've done testing where I exercise in a fasting state, and I keep track of it, right? If it is a workout for time, for example. So I do the same routine later with food, and it's inevitable. Every single time I do better when I have food. And I'm talking about food is prior, right? Not eating a lot before the workout. And then there is how am I going to build muscles if that's the goal, which I think that for most of us, that should be always a goal, to build muscle to help protect, and help with that blood sugar management and insulin sensitivity when it comes to blood sugar, is what am I doing after the meal, after the workout, to build those muscles? Or is the body over here is going to go because it's in maybe a catabolic state, is going to go to your muscles and is going to break down for, the protein, for glucose, because it needs it, because it's in a state of stress? Or am I going to put, in my case, amino acids that is going to replenish, immediately, and then later I can eat without impacting much of my growth hormones and things like that? Does that kind of make sense, what I was saying over here? I think the listener as a practitioner would understand, right?
Right. I think it totally makes sense. And so I totally agree with you that everybody in the world should be wearing a glucose meter for at least 2 weeks and be instructed in how to measure and how to determine how things are affecting them. But I know that, it goes back to genetics. There are people, and there have been studies out there that show that athletes who do endurance or strength training in a fasted state actually do better in the fasted state than they do in the fed state. But that probably has a lot to do with their genetic factors. So you can't just assume because you read a report, you read a research paper, that that's going to apply to you or your clients. So it's really important to listen, observe, and if you can, look at their genetics. So it's fascinating. You get a lot of information. And I think the key to us being effective is personalizing, not just the nutrition program, not just a supplement program or not a supplement program, but also the fitness program based on that person's unique needs at the time.
Right. And, if a person has some conditions already, if been diagnosed with, let's say, PCOS, or the person is is obese, or the person already has type 2 diabetes, or even insulin resistance, those things will change. We cannot expect the same results and the same approach. Right? And the answer over here is not going to be night and day either. Certain things people are going to respond very quickly, and others they are not. I mean, especially if there is insulin resistance involved. And at the same time, if a person's saying, you know what, this is a switch. I'm turning everything off over here that I've been doing that is not helping my body, and I'm going to turn everything on that will help. That person can achieve amazing results. I reversed my pre-diabetes in less than 6 months, right? Now, if it is a person with diabetes and it has been on insulin for 10 years, boy, don't we have to have more patients here? The idea with all this that we are helping our clients and ourselves, right? Because in some ways we're all guinea pigs, some way or another. We have to understand that this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And there is going to be steps that are going to the right direction. Other steps we have to say, you know what, this is not going the right direction. And that's when we find more testing. That's when maybe a genetic testing over here is the one to go. Or maybe really you have to dive into your hormones. You got to dive into your digestive system, because all those things are interrelated and dependent. So the results, if you could be eating the best foods to support your exercise routine and not getting results, well, it could simply be that one of the main factors is dysbiosis, or could be some other virus or infection that you have that is preventing the body to actually do its job, right? So the diet itself might not get you to the next level, or the exercise itself is not going to get we have to take a dive deeper, at times to really find certain imbalances, especially if this imbalance has been going on for some time now.
Totally. I totally agree. So thank you so much for all your great insights. I've really appreciated it and really enjoyed talking to you. We've been talking to Maria Horstman. You can find her at bfabbu.com, and we'll have all her links and everything in the show notes. So be sure to check out the show notes. As you can hear from our conversation, exercise is a critical part of the health plans you make for clients and patients. Whether you create the exercise plan or you refer them to somebody like Maria who has that more extensive knowledge, you need to make sure that you're talking to people about moving their body. So the standard recommendations we said earlier of let's just exercise, walk for an hour a day, 4 days a week. That may not be appropriate for some people. They may not even be able to do an hour a day. They may be, doing it and it's just not moving the needle. It's not doing anything for them. So we have to just, as always, ask lots of questions and be able to interpret the feedback we're getting that the body's giving us to say, how do we update and how do we make this? So we talked about bone health. Strength training is so important for bone health, for blood sugar balance, but overall just health and vitality and the joy with which you wake up and face the world. And when you know how to help people get fit without compromising their health, you're going to be more successful as a practitioner. You're not going to have these people go, don't go talk to her. She's going to make you work out too hard and you're going to get hurt. But also knowing these genes can be helpful, especially if somebody has the collagen related genes that they have difficulty with repair, or they have the FTO gene, or they're a sprinter. They have a sprinter gene, but they've been trying to do marathons. All of this stuff is important to do. So on the show notes page, which is at reinventhealthcare.com, you'll see all the links to Maria's sites and social media. She has a YouTube channel. She has a Facebook group. And she's just got a lot of good resources out there. And help you become proficient at nutrigenomics. We have a lot of resources out there when you go to reinventhealthcare.com/genes.